Wow. Sorry. You're standing.
Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? My name is Waco. Welcome to our Creative Hub session with Max Büsser on Thinking Differently, aka Max Büsser's TED Talk on how to crush life and overcome adversity. But first, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Max's lovely family. Tiffany, how are you, my dear? And to the two daughters as well. How are you guys? Yeah. If you want to know who the real brains of the operation are, it's probably...
You realize they're never going to come back again. It's their first talk and they're never coming back.
I'm so sorry. Max, please have a seat, sir.
Thank you. All right.
So the theme of our talk today is thinking differently. And Max, 2 years ago, you locked yourself in a room with your entire team, and you were trying to determine what your mission was. I see Harris nodding his head. He was like, yeah, I was there too. And after an entire day of deliberation, of arguing, of talking back and forth, you said, you know what? Our mission is thinking differently, to encourage people to think creatively. Max, tell us about that and what that means to you, sir.
Okay, let me put a bit of context here. So for me, MBNF has always been about pride, being proud. And whatever I do as an entrepreneur, as a human being, as a creator, I just want to be proud the last day of my life. But then your team starts growing, and their why cannot be making Max proud, even though I'm very grateful. But so we indeed, I took a moderator, and decided what's the why of MBNF? Why do we exist? And it didn't take a whole day. It took 20 minutes. I was expecting the whole day. And it was incredible. So there were 4 of us. I took a back seat. And very quickly we realized that why MBNF exists actually was not linked to watchmaking, which was very weird because watchmaking is my life, saved my life, what made it worthwhile before I had a family. And what made me very proud is that we're here to inspire people to think differently, to take more risks, to be more creative. And if you look at what we've managed to do with such little means and such strong ethics over... I'm sorry, I don't know if this is me.
Sorry, guys. Should we just switch to another handheld, if you don't mind?
Let's see. So that could maybe inspire you to think differently. 2 years later, I will admit that the think differently has evolved a little bit. Just being different for the fact of being different doesn't really make much sense. It's actually finding your true north. It's finding what resonates for you. And I think we all know people who...
So we're just going to do one quick technical moment. So you see the theme was overcoming adversity, and we actually orchestrated this intentionally to show you how Max is able to overcome adversity so wonderfully.
Use the difficulty Michael Caine used to say. Okay, you can leave it. Cheers. So yeah, finding your true north. We all know people who don't like their jobs, who don't feel comfortable in their social environment, who are running after money instead of trying to build real relationships with people. And don't get me wrong, there are probably 2-3 billion people on the planet don't have a choice. But I'm pretty sure that some of us here have a choice. So it was all about that choice. You can actually choose where you want to go. And what really makes me proud today is the messages I get on social media, I get a lot, where people tell me I can never afford what you do. But thanks to what you've been doing in MBNF, I'm actually going to do this or that in my life. I just hope they don't fail, but that's a pretty big responsibility. But that's what we're here about.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you know, one of the wonderful things about an MBNF watch, for me at least, is it's a symbol or totem of courage, of resilience as well. I know everything you've been through. We just had an incredible conversation led by Mr. Stephen McDonald, and to understand what he went through as well, and goes through each time he creates a watch. So I remember when we were workshopping this creative hub, one of the working titles was, kids, please close your ears, shit happens, right? Because the reality of life is that we are constantly beset by adversity, right? And I remember you saying thinking differently is also when you look at problems that will invariably creep up, because they always do, how do you react to them? Do you let them beat you down, or do you find a way to survive and evolve and become better? Max, tell us about that.
Yeah. So the point is not being a contrarian, because this whole think differently is sort of taken, okay, everybody does that, I have to do something differently. It's about finding what's important for you and what resonates for you. I think as an entrepreneur, typically you're often, that's a solution which would make more sense, would maybe make more money, but I'm not very proud of it. And that solution maybe makes less sense, makes much less money, but I'm super proud of it. So it's about finding where you want to go. And I know where I want to go. I think that is a good example is the story of Mad One. So if you bear with me, Mad One didn't start its life as Mad One. When I started the brand MBNF 18 years ago, I had decided to create a watch which was also in that price point, in about 3,000 francs. It was supposed to be called Green Dog, and I'd already designed it, done the prototypes. You'd probably even seen it. I'd taken orders, and I didn't find the money to make the brand come to life. Why did I want to create that brand? Because I come from a family background which nobody can afford what I can make at MBNF. And so I wanted to do it. It didn't happen. Luckily, because many years later, I nearly went bankrupt a few times, and I don't know how I would have been able to juggle both. Then 2014, I create what becomes afterwards, many years later, the Mad One. And I decided, oh, that's a great product. Let's create a brand around it. And from 2014 to 2018, we create a brand, which is not Mad Edition. It's completely different. It's a really cool brand. And late 2018, I killed the project, to the dismay of most of the people in the team, because they'd all worked hard on it. And it's because I realized that I don't have enough time for my family. I don't have enough time for MBNF. How am I actually going to create a second brand? So there you go, you adapt. It seemed a great idea. You go, okay, that doesn't make any more sense. The person I was 4 years ago has changed. And then we put it in the cardboard and we forget about it. And then 17th of March 2020, I send back the whole MBNF team to its lockdown. They all have to go back home. The whole world is in lockdown. And I'm thinking, nobody's ever going to buy a watch again. I mean, who is going to buy a watch again? And I get on my first Zoom. I never had done a Zoom in my life. I was here in Dubai. The team was in Geneva. And I'm telling them, look, I've kept all the profits of the company over all these years in the company. They're not much, but we can survive for about 16, 18 months. So, guys, find a way to bring some money into the company without any R&D, because there's no way we can afford any R&D. And somebody comes up with, oh, there's that cheaper watch we did. And you're looking at the guy going, the world is falling apart. Is this the moment to launch a new brand? And during that session, I think it was Arnaud, one of us came up with the idea, well, let's call it an edition. An edition is not a brand. And we can actually do 500 pieces once, get a bit of money in, and that's it. So we start thinking about that, we launch everything, but 3 months later, we realize it's not Armageddon, and actually people are actually buying MBNF watches. So now here we are, we don't need this mad edition, but we've launched it in production. And then you're like, okay, now what do we do with this? And we decide we're going to say thank you. And so we create those 500 pieces for the artisans who'd worked with us and the tribe members, all the people who had an MBNF. And, well, those we knew at least. And we do that. And we don't tell anybody about it. We just send emails out. And then the social media goes crazy. And there we're like, now what do we do? Because people are saying, wait a minute, you're finally creating a watch I can afford. I love MBNF, but I can't afford it. You're doing something I can afford, and you bastards, you're not selling it to me. And you're like, oh, okay, now what do we do? So you're constantly, like, okay, that's the next step. So then we have the idea of doing the red. And because we didn't want the same as the blue for the tribe. But we don't want to do a drop, because we all hate drops. Yeah, I mean, imagine we're in Geneva at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's maybe 11 p.m. in Tokyo, it's maybe 5 a.m. in LA. Nobody wants to be at a certain time in front of their computer with their credit card and having a 90% chance of not getting the watch. And so we didn't do that. And we didn't want people to stand in queue in front of a boutique and not getting the watch. And so we said, okay, maybe the fairest part is a raffle. So again, our true north has always made us take decisions, and we adapt. There's no right or wrong. There's our inner self which makes us advance.
Thank you very much, Max. One of my favorite texts is a book called the Bhagavad Gita. And in it says that life is suffering, but we should participate joyously in the suffering. I want to ask you about these moments, these 3 seminal moments in your life where you almost went bankrupt. 2007, 2012, and 2014. And apparently, as you were explaining to me, in each of these moments, though you were on the precipice of disaster, it ended up being incredibly beneficial to you. Maybe let's start with the first one, because I love this story, because it's a story also of friendship. Let's start with that, sir.
So I'm sorry for those who know the story already. My dad used to always say the same stories, and it used to drive me crazy, so bear with me, but there's a silver lining on this one. 2005, I create the brand with my little means in my flat. And in 2006, we managed incredibly with this whole group of artisans to come out with a working prototype, which was, I've never managed to do that as fast ever since. And that's April 2006. May 2006, the company which was actually engineering the movement, doing the parts of the movement and supposedly going to assemble them, gets sold overnight to a brand because they had financial issues. Now, clearly that brand had no intention to make components or movements for third parties, and I get that, but that's the beginning of a real disaster. So here we go through horrendous months, and on the 8th of January 2007, the new owner tells me, we're not going to assemble your movements. Like, sorry? No, we can't assemble your movements, deal with it. It's the only time in my life I've groveled, and by an incredible chance, that day, I still don't understand how it happened, my friend Peter Speakmarin, the watchmaker, was with me at that meeting. And he's looking at me making a fool of myself, and at some point just takes my arm and he says, let it go, we'll deal with it. And I'm like, how the are we going to deal with it? Sorry, girls. And it was, he just looked at me and said, we'll deal with it. And here we are, driving down from Le Jura down to his workshops in Rolle, and he's calling up his friends, who are all independent watchmakers, and saying, look, my friend Max is in trouble, and they all, who the hell is Max? It's like, that's not the deal. We need somebody to assemble his movement. And 2007 was like 2021. You couldn't get a watchmaker for the love of money. Make a long story short, 10 days later, we are 5 watchmakers with Peter in his workshops in Rolle. 4 of them I didn't know. And he tells them, here we are, we've got 5 trays of components. 50 out of the 360 components are missing. We don't have the assembly plans. Go for it. And the guy's like, you're joking, right? It's like, nope, we're going to do this. And every 2 weeks, we would meet each other, and I would disintegrate. Because the guys were like, what's this? Where does this go? Plus, some components were badly machined. I went back to the company. They told me to go and have a walk. We discovered there were some construction issues. And here I am with that team. And amongst that team is a young man I've never met, whose name is Stephen McDonnell, who just did the most incredible talk 2 hours ago. So thank you, Stephen, who took the lead. And he was at that moment a professor at WOSTEP, and he was actually doing this for me that he didn't even know during evenings and nights, redoing parts, re-engineering things. And January, February, March, April, May, June, it took, usually assembling an HM1 should take about 2 weeks. This is 5 months later, we managed to deliver the first pieces like a week before bankruptcy. Wow. The silver lining is I met Stephen.
Incredible.
And both our lives completely changed through that. The perpetual, the sequential. So out of something so horrendous where we should have gone down, it created an extraordinary moment of creativity for everyone, and it's changed our lives. So that's 2007.
Max, I don't want to stop you there because I love how much you value your friendships. And I know that you take your friendships extremely seriously. And I want to know the story about when you found out later that Stephen was in trouble, you went to go to help him out, even though you didn't know how you were going to do it.
Guys, you're here for 2 hours. So in 2011, Peter, again, I bumped into during Basel Fair, said, look, are you aware that Stephen but he was basically creating his first movement for a brand which was in difficulty and couldn't pay him anymore. And so with Serge, my partner and technical director in the company, we drove up to Neuchâtel, he was still in Neuchâtel, and said, look, Stephen, you saved our life, how can we help you? You can assemble some movements, but you're so worth more than that. And he said, well, I have an idea for a perpetual calendar. And I remember saying, no way. Perpetual calendars don't work. I call them boomerangs. They come out of the workshop, they come back into the workshop. They come out of the workshop, they come back. They just never work. And when they do work, usually the client himself breaks them while changing the date at the wrong time. And Stephen just looked at me and said, well, that's normal. Like, yes. Because Stephen never went to watchmaking school and he's analyzed all the movements by passion, he immediately saw the intrinsic flaws of the existing construction of a perpetual as we've been using for 150 years. And he said, well, first of all, most perpetuals are a movement which wants to turn on 31 days. You put a module on it, which 6 months a year is going to want to make it do something different. No, you don't go to 31. You jump to 1. Hence the blockages and all the things which happen. He said, 12 months in the year have 28 days. Let's start with 28. It's just so incredibly simple. But then how are we going to do it? And then if you haven't seen Stephen talk an hour ago, please go online because you'll see the horrendous 5 years he spent solving this incredible riddle and coming out with this incredible product. Yeah.
And congratulations to both of you. It's an exceptional watch. I'm lucky enough to own one, and it is to me one of the most staggeringly beautiful watches I own, and it's impossible to break because I'm an idiot and I haven't broke it. So I want to go from that to the second time that you faced bankruptcy, and this is in 2012. And what did you learn from that, sir?
So 2012, we're now starting to get into we're doing pretty much okay. I think we're doing about 11 million revenue that year, we planned. And in August, September, we had 4.5 million on open order we still had to deliver. And 80% of that disappeared in 3 weeks. So you're left with 1 million. You can basically pay the salaries for the next more or less month, 6 weeks. Just disappeared for many different reasons. The first one was our case manufacturer. This is a typical Swiss thing. You all think the Swiss are very precise and they honor their word. Swiss component manufacturers have a different logic. So in August tells us that HM5 case, which was the watch we were going to launch, we can't do it this year. Sorry? No, we can't do it this year. So that's like 1.8 million out of the window. That made that afterwards we started making our own cases. So today 80% of all MB&F cases are made in-house. So I have to thank that manufacturer, even though on the moment I really didn't thank them. Second thing, some retailers started playing games. We're not, of course, not talking of the Siddiquis. Oh yes, I'll take that product I'd ordered, but you know, I've got this other product which has been in the inventory for 2-3 years. You're going to have to take it back. If I do that, we're dead. Because don't forget that we're completely auto-financed from the first day. And that we basically all weeded them out. We told them to go to hell, and we stopped working with them. And it was a good thing, but on the moment, it was rough. I think we lost 1 million in orders. And then, I don't know, I don't think Felix is in the room. And then we launched C3, H5, N3, 09. So that is the chemical, formula of nitroglycerin.
An explosive it was, sir.
Our friends from Oerwerk and us decided to do a collab together. And we were only going to do 12 pieces in 2012 and 12 pieces in 2013. It was this incredible Wankel-inspired movement. And it was an incredible product. But because we're 11 years ago, between Oerwerk and us, we had different distribution channels, different margins. He had some distributors, I didn't. So we didn't know how we were going to sell this. We decided to go online. Nobody in 2012 had tried to sell anything online, and not a 110,000 Swiss franc watch. So we say, at least we're going to learn. God, did we learn. So we put the watch online. What we learned is that our retailers got super upset with us. And we got into big discussions. And there was a lot of orders which were cancelled, etc. And look, at the end of the day, we got through it. What happened there is it's like in a marriage, it's like in a relationship. All the people who we had constructive discussions, even though they were the retail partners, even though they were angry, are today have got galleries, labs, and 18 years later, from the beginning, we're working together and we're much stronger. Because they saw that we were coming from a place of love. We were not trying to squirrel out a bit of money. It was not about that. And what I learned is perception is more important than reality. And that's tough. Because when you do something and you think you're being as fair as you can, and people don't get it, it's really rough. And in the era of social media, good grief. We end up doing things as best as we can, as fair, and suddenly you have keyboard warriors turning up right, left, and the other. But that was the first. That was 10 years ago. And then this 2014. My God, have you got refreshments for everybody? So 2014 is my fault. It's 100% my fault. In 2012, as we'd gone over so many tough times, I thought, you know what? Let's not do 1 caliber a year. Let's do 2 calibers a year. There is no way that a little company like ours with that revenue can ever do even 1 caliber is already a feat. But I thought it would be cool to do 2. So here we are in 2014, 7 consecutive months of negative cash flow, and realizing that we're going to die. We're going right into the wall. And I have to cut everything I can. I remember telling my team, nobody's losing their job, but guys, we're going to have to cut everything. And one of the things we had to cut was an order of 100 movements from our friends at Girard-Perregaux. Now, I had this incredible working relationship with Gino Macaluso of the previous era, and he passed away. He sold to Kering. There was a new CEO, who's not at all Patrick, who's my very good friend today, but it was before Patrick. And of course, these guys were there as mercenaries, basically. And so I went to them and I said, look, I can't pay in advance because they wanted us to pay in advance, a year in advance, the movements for next year. So can we postpone? And the guys said no. If you postpone, 80% penalty. So basically you have to pay for it anyway. And I tried to explain everything I could. They didn't care, they didn't budge. And I came back to Geneva, and when I'm very upset, I get a massive sinus issue, sinus chronicle thing. And the only way I can actually deal with that, if it's not antibiotics, is acupuncture. So here I am on my acupuncture table with my 20 needles, fuming, going, how am I going to deal with this thing? And I have to find a way to use these GP movements. And I'm seeing, the good thing of acupuncture is that either you fall asleep or you think. And I'm seeing this movement, putting it upside down and putting 2 cylinders underneath, that would be pretty cool. And then I'm thinking, but if it's not a GP movement, this could be an inexpensive watch. Once the needles are off, I run back to the office, sit down with Serge, do a bad sketch of this. And that was not planned, but that's perfect timing. And it's going to become the mad one. So thank you, that gentleman at GP who refused to cancel the movements, because I probably wouldn't have had that idea at that moment.
That's amazing. Max, you mentioned that, during the challenging period of this watch that you created together with Felix, you had conversations with different people, retailers, and the ones that you stuck with ended up becoming great friends and great partners. There's the German philosopher Goethe had said, "Be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid." Tell me a little bit about how a champion emerged for you by the Siddiqui family, and how they created their first Mad Gallery together with you here, with no objective or even understanding of how it could be profitable.
When I started this company, I thought everything was about creating great products. And it's probably because I'm getting old that I realize 18 years later that it's much more about the journey. And it's all the people all those relationships that we've created which are really meaningful. So my story with the Siddiqui family goes back 25 years. 25 years ago, I'm 31 years old, I have inherited the management of Harry Winston Timepieces, which is in a very, very dire situation. 90% of the revenue is done in this part of the world, of the little revenue is done, and 90% of that revenue is done by one retailer in another country, close by, who's getting massive discounts from my predecessor. So I just discover that's just one of the many issues, there were issues everywhere. I discover all of this. I jump on a plane. I've never been to the Middle East in my life. And I was reading a book of how you should say hello. And here I arrive and meet Abdul Majid Siddiqui, Mohammed's father and Hamid's brother. And I'm asking him, so how come you're only selling 2-3 watches a year? And he says, well, I can't sell anything because your neighbors are selling under my cost. I'm like, okay, well, that's not good. I swear I'm going to change that. He says, okay, we'll see. And that's it. So I didn't leave with an order, I didn't leave with anything. This is like in November 1998. March 1999 is Basel Fair, our first Basel Fair. I've scrambled every little cent we have to try and make a booth and create some products in super quick time. And the famous retailer who's doing like 80% of our revenue comes and, of course, asks for a massive discount because he's used to it. And I'm like, nope, we can't do that. So he comes first time. Second time, he said, if I order 100 more watches, 200 more watches. Like, nope. I give him a little discount. I mean, you buy 300 watches, you're not going to get the same thing as somebody who buys 3. But he's absolutely not happy. He's furious. And he says, look, if you don't give me what I want now, I'm storming out and I'm not buying any more watches. It's 80% of our revenue. And I say, that's it. And he leaves. And my whole team looks at me like, are you out of your effing mind? Like, we've all lost our jobs. And I'm thinking, what have I done? But I can't accept it, because that's, when you're going to accept that moment is going to be your whole life with that retailer. And 2 days later, I'm told Majid Siddiqui is at the reception of the booth, or a little booth, so I go down, and he's coming to say goodbye. And so I said, you want a coffee? He said, yeah, sure. And I am in a state of absolute disintegration. I mean, like, I am dying here. And he looks at me and he goes, so how are things? And if anybody has been to a watch fair, even if you're on the verge of bankruptcy, you say, great. And it's like, fantastic. And he looks at me and he goes, it'll be okay. And honestly, I didn't, like, yeah, sure, it's going to be okay. And he looks at me and he says, so when are you coming to Dubai? I had like 5 retailers in the world, they were all here. Like, sure, next month, I'll jump on a plane. He said, okay, come and see me. So a month later, I'm in his little office, which is in Bur Dubai. We're talking of 25 years ago. I mean, Siddiqui Empire, which you know now, was not at all what it was then. It was a small company. And he says, do you have a product catalog? And we didn't even have money to shoot the photos. We had a catalog with drawings in it. And so he's looking at this folder, and he goes, so they were selling 2 to 3 watches a year. And he goes, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2. 3, 1, 2. And I'm just looking at him going, what's he doing? He looks at me and says, are you going to take down my order? Like, what? And so here I am, and I'm like fiddling with that, and he's going to give me a 65-piece order, which they probably have a few still in stock, and I will. How can I ever forget that? It was his way of saying, you kept your ground. I heard about it. I'm here to help you. 7 years later, I'm in the new office of Capricorn Tower. Now Siddiqui Group has become much bigger, with Majid and Mohammed, his son. And I arrived with the drawing of HM1, you know, that weird watch which started the MBNF story. And like, would you like to order a few pieces? And I remember Majid going to Mohammed like, can you sell that? And Mohammed's like, yeah, there's some people out there who may be interested. And so he says, so how many do you want me to order? I say, well, can you take one of each? There were 4 references. He says, yeah. And so there's just a little issue. I don't have enough money. So he looks at me and says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't have enough money for this, so either go and find a financial investor, but I have no idea where to find them, and that's the end of my dream, or you believe me and you're going to pay me 1/3 now, and I'll deliver in 2 years. And he is one of the 6 retailers who said okay. So again, I wouldn't be sitting here without that family. So here we start working together with MBNF. And contrary to Winston, which really took off, MBNF never took off. Again, in 2012, we opened the Mad Gallery in Geneva in 2011. 2012, 2013, if in a good year we would sell 2 MBNFs here, it was a lot. And in a bad year, it was... And one day they come to me, the family, I can't remember if it's Mohammed or Osama, and say, we'd like to open a Mad Gallery. What? And I remember saying, do you expect to make any money? And they're like, no, this is not about that. We love the concept. I think Dubai needs a Mad Gallery. And that's how we started. And now, last year, it was our biggest point of sale in the world. And there you go. That's 25 years of history, 25 years of a journey.
That's incredible. Okay, I'm going to mention a couple of movies to the audience. So Blade Runner, The Big Lebowski, and an old movie about Christmas called It's a Wonderful Life. Does anyone know what those movies all have in common? They were massive flops, right? Like, just horrific. So, Max, everyone looks at you as, having one success after another, creating one, like, knockout hit after the other. Have you ever had a flop? And if you've had a flop, was it horrific, or was there a silver lining?
There have been many. But again, there were economical flops, financial flops, but I still love those products to death because I created them because I love them. But I think there are 2 good examples. One is the Legacy Machine 101, which is like the longest waiting list in the history of our history today. It's like, at some point it was up at 10 years of waiting list on a 101, which when it started in 2014, nobody wanted. When I say nobody, it's nobody wanted a 101. 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, for 5 years, I would basically try and manage to sell 20, 25 a year, and they were all stuck at the retailers, and nobody wanted them. And when you create a movement which is so expensive now, we're not talking of a perpetual, sequential, which is a gigantic movement, but even a 101, you need to achieve a certain revenue to just amortize the R&D. And I was looking at the revenues we were generating with these watches every year, thinking, I'm going to be doing 20 watches a year for the next 25 years just to amortize this. And suddenly in 2020, the world discovered it. I still have no idea why. And the only reason I kept that watch going is I couldn't amortize the R&D. And now it's the most sought after watch in our collection. So that's, you never know. And then there's another flop, which was an absolute flop, which was the HM5, the Horological Machine 5, which the one which looked like the Lamborghini Miura. It was my first piece, which was created on the fact that I wanted to be a car designer when I was a kid. So it's based on the Lamborghini Miura. The birth of that watch was an ordeal, an absolute ordeal. I don't want to take too much time. It was an absolute ordeal. We finally managed to deliver the first pieces. The first pieces are sold because we have the die-hard MBNF owners who want the next HM, and I love them, whoever you are in the room, thank you. And then it stopped. And again, we needed to amortize that piece, so we did 66 in zirconium, 66 in red gold, 66 in black carbon mackerel, and we ended not doing them because they were just sat in stores. And there are probably still a few around. And the silver lining, there are two. The first is that thanks to HM5, I'm going to design HMX, and then HM8. And now we've got HM8 Mark II, where everybody's like, wow, this is so cool. That's 10 years later, so maybe we're a little bit too early. And there's another silver lining, which I'll never forget, which is a Dubai Watch Week story. There are a lot of Dubai Watch Week stories. I think it's, let me see, 21, 19, it's 2017. I meet for the first time Fabrizio Bonamassa, the head designer of Bulgari. And I'm like this fanboy. I go up to him and I'm like, oh, I'm Fabrizio, I'm Max. He's like, I know you. The HM5 is a fantastico piece.
Sounds exactly like him.
You're the only guy in the world who thinks that. And it had to be him. And so we're going to have a coffee, and he's always walking around with a little notebook. And here he starts drawing an HM5 by Bulgari. It would be fantastic to do the Bulgari HM5, no? And I'm like... And we didn't do the HM5 Bulgari, but then we did the Flying T 2 years ago, and you guys are in for a little surprise end of next year because working with that team is just so incredible. Wow. But again, maybe we still would have done that, but that HM5 helped.
Thank you, Max. Max, I love your collectors. They are kind of crazy dudes, all creatives, all who think differently. One in particular that I got to meet, thanks to you, is a gentleman named Wen Xie. And Wen Xie was really interesting because he is the managing partner of Kleiner Perkins. And I remember I was having a conversation with him about watches once. And being kind of a naive fool that I am, I didn't realize that I was occupying his time while Silicon Valley Bank was collapsing, right? And, you know, being the biggest VC in Silicon Valley was a big deal. Then when, you know, my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, was like, have you seen what's going on in the news? I was like, oh my God. I was like, Wen, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I was so egotistical to take your time during such a challenging moment. He said, Wei, don't worry. Anyway, we've already figured out what we're going to do. We're not going to, you know, pull our money from the bank because no bank can survive a run. Remember, Wei, people will always remember how you acted when times were bad, not when times were good. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And the other thing that I learned from him, which was interesting, he also later said, you know, there's only two types of people in life. And I said, well, what are they? He said, there's missionaries and mercenaries. And the mercenaries are the guys who are driven by profit. They're coin operated. They always want to maximize profit no matter what. And the irony is they never really make that much, and they're never really satisfied. The missionary is the guy who wants to change the world, who wants to create excellence, you know, wants to revolutionize things. And oftentimes, if he's good at his job, the positive byproduct is a large financial windfall. I kind of know the answer to this question already because I think of you as the ultimate missionary. But Max, what is your long-term goal for MBNF? And would you ever be inclined to be a mercenary? I know you're not. And what is your mission?
So, as I've always said, MBNF is a life decision. It's not a business decision. I am blessed to have an extraordinary team, and that's because we are on a mission. And when you notice, and I was at that breakfast when he was talking about the missionaries and mercenaries, and that's why I realized missionaries, they think we. Mercenaries, they think I.
Yes.
And I've made some HR errors at MBNF. I mean, if I've got some one of the only regrets I have, there never been product regrets, because even though they didn't sell, they're super cool. But it's some people I hired maybe because of their competence, and I didn't pay enough attention to their mindset. And that's taught me the hard way. I find that mercenary companies tend to be all about power and control, and missionary companies about sharing. And as the journey, as I'm getting less young, you realize that that second part of being generous, creating something together, bonding, creating incredible relationships is by far more important than even it was originally. Now, having said that, at the beginning of MBNF, it was work, and whatever it took in our ethics, we would do it. Now I realize, before I had children, I had no empathy for people who had issues with their nanny or things like that. I was like, shh, do the job. And now I get it. I'm like, yeah, quickly go home. So you change. But so coming back to, we're on a mission, and I'm very blessed that it attracts incredible people in the team.
Thank you very much, Max. Last two questions. The first one is, we've experienced a crazy last couple of years in the watch industry. I mean, people were going absolutely nuts. There was an explosion of popularity for timepieces that we'd never expected and we'd never seen before. It was unprecedented. During this period, of course, the hype years, I guess a lot of people are calling it, there must have been temptation to fall victim to buying into the hype. But I know every conversation I had with you, you're like, no, I'm just going to stay focused. I'm only going to do it my way. If I increase, I'm going to increase a minuscule amount and in a really conservative way. Why that philosophy, and do you think that that philosophy will serve you particularly well now that the market has changed?
The first 15 years of MBNF have been often so tough that I was a bit like an antelope in the middle of the savannah, wondering when the cheetah or the leopard or the lion was going to come and pounce and eat us up. So you're like all the time, I've got a cat at home who's like that, always wondering when something's going to happen. And those are reflexes you have. So from there, when it started getting really great, you're like, no, there's some con here. Something is going to happen. It's not possible. And you remember when I created the brand, I said we'll never be more than 15. And there was still this idea, I want to remain a startup company in the mindset. If we've able to move mountains as we have with such little means, it's thanks to this incredible team, not only internally, but all the people who work with us. And I don't want to lose that. I just don't want to lose that. Now, having said that, if we come to a few facts, I remember that February last year, I was feeling a bit like a loser because some of my colleagues were selling at 3, 4, 5 times retail. And we at the best in the secondary market were at plus 30%. And we were like, oh, we're all losers here. And we didn't change the way we worked. And today, when the whole bubble hasn't exploded, it's really deflated. Whenever we call somebody up and say, you were on the waiting list 2 years ago, do you want that watch? They're like, yeah, of course I want that watch. And I don't think it's happening with all the brands. So again, we thought we were doing something wrong. We compare ourselves to other people. You know, I'm in a bank and I'm waiting at the till of 5 people in front of me. I know I have to wait. But if the line next to me goes fast, I get really aggravated. So that's the point. We're all the time comparing ourselves to others. And we managed to stay the course also because the team wants to. That's the story we want. That's the brand we want. We've never wanted to be a 1,000, 5,000 piece brand. That's never been the goal.
Last question for you, Max, is you face enormous adversity. You've been so resilient. You've come out of it for the better at each instance. How important is your family to you in terms of being that foundation and giving you that emotional support, and especially having such an incredible wife?
They've changed my life, that for sure. And that was not a planned question, so now I'm going to have to find. I think Tiffany's made me by far a better person. She's made me more human. Those who saw Ian Skellen's film, when she says he doesn't look as much as an asshole as before, that I thank you, my love. My daughters are extraordinary. They've taught me love, but they've taught me resilience also. My elder daughter had a really rough year last year, and it was very tough for her. It was very tough for me because she lived what I'd lived when I was a kid, and she got out of it. She grew so incredibly well. You've become an incredible person, and I'm so proud of you. So there you go.
That's awesome, Max. The last thing is that before we turn over the floor of questions, I think Max and I were discussing, when you talk about mission-driven, there's no people that embody that better than the Siddiqui family. So just a huge shout out for Dubai Watch Week for creating this incredible community. All righty, this is it. Okay, hands are raising already. I believe the gentleman in the festive cap.
Max, I want to ask that how the complications and complex watches are get more in the future, and how more in design they're going to get more dramatic. You're raising a benchmark, every 2 years, 3 years. So how is it going to get more and more dramatic and complex in terms of the entire watch?
I'm making my life so much more complicated every year. It's not the watches I'm making more, it's my life. And you know why? Because you guys' expectations keep on going up. And so when I started, nobody had any expectation. I was just terrified nobody was going to buy the piece. Now, when it comes out, you're like, okay, I've got this. There are over 1,000 MBNF owners, plus all the fans, who are like sitting in front of their phones going, you better amaze me. And and so I think the only solution to that is that if I feel like I'm doing, but we're doing the same thing, we feel empty and dead. So we tend to push our boundaries all the time because that's what makes us feel alive. We're adrenaline junkies, we're dopamine junkies, and we would never do something which is, as the Singaporeans would say, meh. But at the same time, we're always terrified. HM11, we're in an era of 36 millimeter vintage-looking watches, and we come out with that 3D house, and it's so cool, and we've worked 5 years on it. It's so many challenges, but the whole team can tell you that the day before we're going, oh my God, how are people going to react? Because nobody wants something like this. And so we tend to be a little bit contrarian, and we push our own, we get our adrenaline from taking risks.
One last question. You have done the collaboration with Bulgari 2 years back. Are you looking to do further collaborations with other brands too?
That's a bit one of the part of the stories is what we call performance art, is when we invite people we admire who are different from us. It's been pointless to do something with the same people. Having said that, I don't know if there are a lot of brands out there like us or creators, but these collabs are for us the occasion of meeting incredible people, and again the journey of working together. And sometimes we want to do another one, like with the whole H. Moser team, where we did then the Pandemonium. Bulgari was so amazing that it would be a pity not to do something. But there are other creators we're working with. But what you want is to create a product which none of the two would have done alone. It's not about slapping a color on a dial. It has to be, I would never have had that idea. they would never have had that idea, and that it creates a great product.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Oh.
Max, thank you so much in terms of touching upon the regrets that you had. If you were to do everything again, what would you do differently?
All the products would be the same. Oh.
Ciao, Fabrizio.
We were talking about you. You had your ears ringing. The products would all be the same, but clearly when I look at my HM1 today, I'm like, what was wrong with you? I would never create that today. I would create HM11. But if I start my story with HM11, then it's the whole Back to the Future story. you change the past, the future's going to change. And so I think it's important I went through that. I think it's important that, but every piece I created was the most important piece at the moment. And that creative journey is what has brought us here. The interesting part, I used to be I was a youngster who was not at all self-asserted, who had a lot of complexes, and I needed, as a young adult, an objective. I needed boundaries. And today I realize what's so cool is I have no idea what stupid idea I'm going to have in 2 minutes or in 2 days. And that's cool. That's what makes us fun.
Any last questions from the audience? Yes, Miguel.
Okay. So one of my favorite Max Büsser stories is the one when he had lunch with Emmanuel Guides at the Vallée de Joux a long time ago. And then Emmanuel showed Max the prototype of the Royal Oak Offshore, and Max said, "Oh, that's horrible, that's a beast, it's never going to sell." So
talk about regrets.
Yeah. So I have a lot of friends, and I always try to evangelize them or get them into watchmaking. And the first thing that they say when they see MBNF or irrevocable, they say, "That's horrible." And then I tell them, just pretend that you've never seen a Formula One in your life. You're used to conventional cars, but then you see, if you see a Formula One out on the streets, you say it's horrible. So what could you tell those people, my friends, that I will show the video of this conference afterwards? What can you tell them about what's ugly or what's not, and the beauty of your timepieces?
Good question. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, you say in English. I'll go back to the last words of Stephen McDonnell at his presentation a few hours ago, where he explained so clearly that what we do is totally pointless. Mechanical watchmaking is totally pointless, therefore it's an act of love. And pain. And it's an act of bearing your soul. Now, clearly there's some very successful high volume products, but when you come into independent watchmaking, you are carrying this piece of the soul and the 5 insane years or 10 insane years that Stephen has put into it, and his sleepless nights. Now you cannot like it. That's perfectly okay. On the contrary, if everybody likes what we do, we're doing something very wrong, because everybody likes vanilla ice cream. But you get a piece of all those stories together, and that's the only thing I can say.
Max, if I may, I would like to ask a question, if I may, since he's in the room. It's a two-part question. First, last year you won the Geneva Grand Prix Aiguille d'Or, the top prize. First of all, how did that make you feel after everything you've been through? And then the second part of my question is, when you started to speak about Stephen in particular, you started to become quite emotional. And now that he's in the room, could you explain to us a little bit more as to why you felt so emotional?
So we don't do this to win prizes. I mean, independent watchmakers, it's our calling, it's our life. The prize is the piece which comes out. Now, when all your peers, in the GPHG, they're not all the peers, but a certain amount of your peers say it's the greatest watch of the year, this was not about me. This has never been about me. I'm wearing it today. I'm so proud of it. I have nothing to do with this piece. It's 100% Stephen. He even came, as he showed you, with the drawing where the dials were. On the perpetual, at least I had my say on the dials. This was like, this is it. And this is it, is 5 years of, and we know what Stephen went through. He explained it so clearly. For any of you who didn't see his talk, please go online. It's insane. And somebody told me just before that it's the first time he cried at a watch presentation during Stephen's presentation. I just had dinner with Stephen 4 days before. He'd refused to be in the public because it was too much for him. And those whole 5 years and that whole discussion with Stephen of what he'd gone through, just Reese came out when I started talking, and I choked up because I know what it means to him. And we're just all, again, so grateful.
Well, if are there any last questions? If not, I would like to thank Mr. Max Büsser for sharing his life with us, for explaining that adversity comes. Of course it does, but it's how you react to it that can make you a better person. Really appreciate it, Max. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.